Rosenblatt chronicles that, NJ.com, New Jersey Advanced Media Sixers beat reporter, and he joins us now with a look at the Sixers' 27 games left to go, Zach, and 30-25, currently 7th place in the Eastern Conference. But for your money, how far can this team move up the standings?
You know, the East is kind of crazily in this clump where it's the top two, which is Toronto and Boston right now, and then even the Cavaliers are only, I think, like 3.5 ahead of the Sixers in the third place spot. The Sixers, I believe, are 2 games out of the 4th seed. So, you know, their ceiling is as high as, you know, it always comes with the if Joel Embiid stays healthy consideration. But they really can climb all the way to the 4th seed if all goes well, especially considering, as you mentioned, the rest of their schedule. I think 16 of the 27 teams they play against currently have a losing record. I mean, that's pretty good luck scheduling-wise.
Yeah, which means their first half of the schedule, the first 55 games anyway, has been very difficult. And I guess when you look at it in that aspect, they've handled it pretty well considering, you know, some of the injuries they've gone through, how young this team is. To be 30-25 where they currently are with 27 left, I guess you would say the first 55 games have been a success.
Oh, absolutely. I think in all ways. I mean, I think they had the second hardest schedule. I don't know if I've ever heard of that before, where a team has the second hardest the first half of the year and maybe the easiest the second half of the year. But they came out of that with a winning record. They already have the most wins of Brett Brown's tenure. Joel Embiid has already surpassed his career high by, I think, 20 games played, and he seems to be pretty healthy right now and playing over 30 minutes a game. I mean, Ben Simmons has exceeded expectations, and their bench hasn't been great, but, you know, it's looked better recently. So I think it'd be hard not to be, you know, very excited about where they are right now. I think most people thought they would probably be hovering around 500 most of the year.
Yeah,
they're on pace to exceed, I think, what Vegas had them at wins-wise, which I think was like 37 or something like that.
Yeah, and adding Bellinelli should help that bench. He helped them out. But Joel Embiid, after the game in L.A. at the All-Star game, you know, he indicated that the goal has been the playoffs, but he kind of indicated, too, that that's just not enough. They want to get a home series in the playoffs, it sounds like.
Yeah, you know, their goal for the first half of the season was, all right, we just want to get to the playoffs. And now that it looks like, you know, barring a pretty bad collapse, I mean, the Pistons aren't far behind, but the Sixers have a pretty good cushion right now. Playoffs are a pretty good chance that's going to happen. So now you look at the standings, and everybody the players in the team always openly admit, and Brett Brown wants them, that they look at the standings pretty frequently, and they know what they're capable of doing. So now the focus becomes, you know, we know our crowd has been one of the best in the league this year, and if we can get the home court advantage in the first round, we think we can win a series. And I think that's kind of what Joel Embiid's message was.
Zack Rosenblatt, NJ.com, covers the Sixers on the Boardwalk Honda hotline here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And, you know, this team, health is a big thing. And we know that Joel Embiid has already played, though, more games this year and more minutes than he did most of last year. But for the most part, other than Markelle Fultz, this team going into the second half here is going to be pretty healthy. I mean, pretty much everybody is ready to go, I guess, save for Justin Anderson. Is that right?
Yeah, Justin Anderson. But he made it sound like he could be back by the end of the week when we spoke to him today. So even him, you know, he had some depth on the wing. He had been playing pretty well before he went down. So I think him and Marco Bellinelli kind of will work well together as, you know, an offensive-defensive pairing. I don't know if Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot will play much anymore. But, yeah, I mean, they're healthy top to bottom, and the most important player of being Embiid, of course. But, you know, yeah, Fultz is the one outlier, and who knows if he's going to play. But health has always been the one thing with this team. And when they've been healthy, they've proven to be one of the best, you know, teams in the Eastern Conference. And their starting five, as I think statistically, is in the top 5 offensively and defensively for rating. So if they stay healthy, you know, they can make some noise in the playoffs. If not, you know, winning the first round, at least bringing it close against a highly seeded team. Yeah,
any new stuff? I saw you tweeting some video of Fultz today. I know of all the injured guys, he did not speak. But anything earth-shattering from what you saw from him today at practice?
Not really. You know, his shot still clearly isn't like completely there. He's improved. He still shows a hitch every now and then when we see him when he's shooting the ball. He's beyond the free throw line now, it seems like, but we still haven't really shoot threes in a while. So, you know, I get asked a lot when I think he'll come back. I think it's more likely he doesn't play the season than he does, but I think he's healthy. It's just a matter of getting that shot back to where they're comfortable throwing him out there.
Yeah, it seems that a lot of people are pretty much resigned to the fact that he will not play. So you're in that camp too, that there's nothing that you've seen over the last 2 weeks or so that makes you feel like he's getting closer?
That's the thing. He does look physically like he can play, and I guess it becomes a strange situation when you have a guy that's maybe completely healthy and they're still holding him out, or he's choosing to be held out. I'm not, depending on who you talk to. But at a certain point, and I know the Sixers have said they're not thinking about it like this, at a certain point it becomes too late in the season to try and incorporate him back into the lineup. They've gotten into a groove. They're in the playoff push. I mean, do you really want to throw a guy out there who might be scared to shoot three-pointers when they already have a guy in Ben Simmons who won't shoot threes, and it might be a little bit of a distraction? So I don't know if it makes much sense for a team that has home court advantage aspirations, unless they're completely confident that he's ready, capable, and not afraid to shoot the ball. I don't think it makes sense to bring him back.
Zach, when you look at the playoff possibilities, now you mentioned they have a little cushion between them and Detroit, and they own the season series against Detroit. So you got to feel pretty good at where they stand right now. But when you look at total of wins, what area do you think they're going to need to be in to kind of move up the ledger a little bit?
It's funny. I looked at the last 5 years what the number 4 seed had win total wise, and it switched off between 48 and 49 wins every single season. So if they want to get the 4 seed, they're going to have to get up in that direction, and that would mean they would have to go, I think, like 18-9 the rest of the way. Which, even with a relatively easy schedule, strength schedule wise, that's a tough mark to attend. Especially if Embiid doesn't play every game. I think that might be tough. I think the story I wrote today, I think I predicted them winning 16 of the rest of the way, which would put them around, I think, 46 wins, which should be good for a top 6 seed. And I think, considering where they were last year and over the last 4 years, that'd be a pretty remarkable achievement.
Yeah, you go from 10 to 28 to 46. I don't know that you can have a lot of even the biggest detractors can really have a lot of argument there, right?
Yeah, exactly. All the crowd that wants Brett Brown fired has kind of quieted down a little bit recently.
It has. I wanted to get into that with you and some of the stuff surrounding this team as they get ready for the second half, because Brown seems like a very polarizing discussion. He's as polarizing the discussion now as Hinkie was when he was here. There's this crowd that thinks he's a nice guy and got them to this point, but that's all he'll ever be. Other people think that it's somewhat of a I don't want to say a miracle, but the fact that they are where they are, that he should be given a lot of credit. Where do you kind of sit in on the Brett Brown conversation on, is he a guy that's gotten the most out of this crew? Should they be better? Should they, are they better than they should be? Are they not as good as they should be? I mean, this one seems to go all over the place.
Yeah, I think you're right. The crowd that calls for his head is the same crowd that was kind of anti-process. But I think it's insane to think that he deserves to be fired. He has the Sixers in the top 5, I believe, in offensive rating and defensive rating. They're one of the 5 best defensive teams in the NBA on a team that doesn't really have much of a bench. I know he's gotten a lot of flack for, they get these big leads and then they blow them. But I think, I don't know what the record is at this point, but a couple weeks ago, it was like they were like 15-6 when they get a lead of 10 or more. So are you expecting them to go 21-0 in that game? Those games, like if they're 21-0 in those games, then they're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And that's pretty ridiculous. I just think that whole thing is ridiculous because the expectations have kind of gone warped because we've seen what Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are capable of. I think they're exceeding expectations this season. I think he does a really good job of coaching up his young guys and motivating his team, and I think he's a pretty good basketball coach on top of that. I mean, we'll see. Once it gets to the playoffs is when you really truly see who the best coaches are, and I think we'll kind of learn a lot about Brett Brown come playoff season.
Well, and Zach, what kind of happened is they lost games against the Phoenixes, the Sacramentos, the Chicagos, and those losses stand out more than winning at Houston, beating Denver on the road, going to L.A. and sweeping. Like, people remember the bad losses more so than they give you credit for the good wins, and they kind of look at it like, well, you lost bad games, therefore you're a bad team, or the coach isn't very good, right? I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it, and I say, well, if you beat Houston on the road, and then you beat Denver on the road, and you beat a couple of teams, San Antonio, and you end up beating Phoenix and Chicago and Sacramento, the next thing you know, this is like a 55-win team, and no one should have really looked at this team as a 55-win team. So it all kind of balances out in the end.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like I said, this team was not supposed to be where it is right now, and I think what your point about them beating these good teams and losing to the bad ones. I think that more than anything, it comes down to them being very young and kind of just learning how to win for the first time. I mean, that's why they blow these big leads. They're starting to they've gotten a lot better at it in the last month or so. And when you're winning, you need to learn how to buckle down and not let up when you're going against the Suns or a Bulls or a Kings, and they've learned that, and they've learned it the hard way, and it just comes with the reality of having they're still one of the youngest teams in the league, even with the addition of J.J. Redick and Amir Johnson. So I think it's pretty ridiculous to get mad at Brett. You can criticize his rotations or whatever you want, but to say he hasn't done a good job coaching his team is just ridiculous.
Well, and one thing, as the season goes on, and once you get to the playoffs, Zach, you'll see coaches and teams tighten that rotation up. Are they in the process now of kind of tightening that rotation up a little bit?
Yeah, he's talked a little bit about how, when he added Markelle Fultz, he viewed him as like the eighth man, and I think once it gets to the playoffs, they'll probably have an 8-man rotation. Maybe the 9th man is Justin Anderson when they bring him in when they need him, some energy and some defense. But, I'd say that they're probably going to get down to 8-man, and I'd say the 3 bench guys are T.J. McConnell, Amir Johnson, who spells Joel Embiid every now and then, and Markelle Fultz, who is kind of the bench version of J.J. Redick. And, that bench is a problem. If somebody were to get hurt in that starting 5, I think they're in trouble come playoff time. But I think that starting 5 should be capable of playing quite a few minutes, and that's why I think they can give some teams some trouble.
Hey, what's your take on, you send Amir Johnson but not Richaun Holmes? It seems that when Richaun gets a little burn that he produces, but he kind of vanishes from the rotation at times. But, it seems like he gives you some energy, some more scoring. Amir has kind of given you the professionalism and the toughness, but why Amir over Holmes?
I think it just comes down to defense more than anything. I think they're not very happy with where Richaun is in terms of effort and how he performs on that end of the ball. I have less of a problem with Amir playing over Richaun than I do Trevor Booker playing over him. I think Trevor Booker hasn't really proven to be much of an addition. He can't really shoot, and he's a veteran and he's tough, but he hasn't really. I think the defense is worse when he's on the floor. So like you said, Richaun does come in and he shows a burst. I would have liked to have seen him play more throughout the season. But now that they get into this playoff stretch run, barring injuries or Joel resting, I would be surprised if he played more. But, yeah, he's a young piece, and I think he's interesting. He's very talented. But I don't know if Brett trusts him on the defensive side of the ball just yet, and defense is kind of the most important thing in Brett's eyes.
Yeah, there's no question that, one thing is for sure, that defense is going to be something that, and you mentioned it, I think their starting lineup might be number 1 in the league when it comes to defense since Christmas time. I mean, and we talked a little bit about some of the bad losses. They've kind of gotten back on those teams. They lost to the Suns, but then they beat them. They lost to the Bulls, and then they end up beating them. So the one thing that I look at with Brett is they have learned from a lot of their mistakes and did not commit the same mistakes, multiple times in a lot of their instances.
Yeah, and even beyond that, you can point to, Joel Embiid has missed, I think, 10 or 11 games total this season. J.J. Redick's missed 11. T.J. McConnell missed a handful. Robert Covington has been through slumps. And I think they've overcome that to the point where they have a 30-25 record. Despite all of that, they're on track to make the playoffs. And, even beyond that, even beyond the core two of Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, the development of Dario Saric has been, I think, one of the most discussed parts about their success this season. Because he's been their most consistent player, not named Joel. And, he's developed as a shooter, which really, really helps in a lineup that doesn't really have much shooters in there when Ben Simmons is your point guard and Joel, who's a decent shooter for his size, but still only shoots about 30%. So Dario's emergence and them staying healthy, especially recently, that's kind of made a huge difference.
Zack Rosenblatt, NJ.com, covers the Sixers here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Let me ask you about Ben Simmons. He kind of got off to this great start. Then he kind of, people were like, well, he's kind of slowed down a little bit. But, obviously he has been a huge game changer to where it's a two-man race for the Rookie of the Year if you think it's really even a race. But do you see him expanding his game throughout this season, or is it just something that, that'll be something, the next step for him will come, this offseason? Or do you kind of see him, expanding his game in this particular season as you've watched him perform for most of this year? Have you seen him expand the game at all?
Not really. I mean, he's every now and then he'll pop out and he'll have like a mid-range jumper that he knocks down. But as Brett pointed out, once it gets to the playoffs, that's when teams start to expose guys' weaknesses. When you're playing the same team for 5 to 7 games in a row, they have the scouting reports. They see what you did the game before. They're going to exploit the fact that he does not. Not only does he, it's not that he can't shoot, he just doesn't shoot. And the teams will give him space, and he'll just try and drive to the rim. And we've seen late in games sometimes that's pretty detrimental to the offense. And I find it hard to believe he'd be able to fix that issue during the season. You would like to at least see him start shooting some more from mid range and making that at least a threat. But that's going to be an issue, and I think a lot of people have kind of pointed out, he's got snubbed for the All-Star game, I think 3 times. And if he gets snubbed for the Rookie of the Year and Donovan Mitchell wins, I think you might see that motivate him a little bit more than you would have. He's a pretty highly motivated guy. And this summer he needs to shoot 1,000 jumpers every day. He needs to become at least a threat to shoot the ball, especially if Markelle Fultz is coming back and Markelle is a shooting issue. You can't have 2 guys in the lineup who are ball dominant who just aren't a threat to shoot the ball.
I want to get your take, too. A lot has been made the last day or so of this Bleacher Report article from Rick Bucher on Sam Hinkie, and I find it fascinating, so much to just where the franchise is and others in the league's view of where the Sixers are. It was kind of a mixed bag of GMs and where they think the Sixers are and whether or not this is a success or not. But how did you think that article painted the picture of where the Sixers are?
I thought the article was well written and I understood the angle, but just the idea that all these anonymous GMs are coming out and trashing what Sam Hinkie did, which is clearly working if you just look at the players that are here right now. You look at some of these contracts that these GMs were given out 2 summers ago. Ian Mahinmi is making $16 million a year, and Bismack Biyombo is making $18 million a year. Evan Turner got signed to an $18 million a year contract, and Joakim Noah's contract. Like, one of those GMs in that story that was criticizing Sam Hinkie, he's one of those. And you're really going to tell me that what Sam Hinkie did is worse than what you handed out a contract to a player that did not deserve it? I mean, I understand the criticism of that time, and I think that article was a little bit more one-sided than I thought it would be. People are going to question Sam Hinkie's methods for a while. I'm not sure if he's going to work again in NBA. I actually would probably doubt that. I don't know if teams will give him the freedom to do what he did in Philadelphia, but yeah, I just find it funny that there's so many incompetent general managers in the NBA, as you see with these contracts and these ridiculous trades where teams are giving up first-round picks for 1-year rentals, and I don't think a lot of these guys have ground to stand on when it comes to making the right decisions.
Zack Rosenblatt, NJ.com. A lot of talk. In fact, ESPN did a whole survey on LeBron James to the Sixers. Everybody seems to, be trying to put pieces together of all these little hints that LeBron drops over the course of the year, and maybe some of his friends, maybe a guy like Ben Simmons. But was that something, that was being talked about out at All-Star Weekend? Was that a topic of conversation? Is it something that is making the rounds through NBA circles?
Well, what's making rounds to the NBA circles is nobody really knows what LeBron wants to do. It is kind of funny, everybody in Philadelphia has kind of turned into conspiracy theorists with LeBron. Ben Simmons posted an Instagram post with LeBron where he has the date of when free agency starts, and there was like some bogus rumor that LeBron was like looking at schools in the Philadelphia area recently, which was debunked. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this happens every time LeBron goes into free agency. There's all this speculation, and I think the Sixers are a legitimate candidate for him. I have no reason. I have nobody who's told me that, but just based on the fact that there's less than 10 teams that have cap space. Of those teams, very few of them have the pieces in place already that would be appealing to LeBron, and the Sixers have that. They can sign him. They have their core of young guys, and it's going to be a wild offseason. The Sixers have been gearing up to go after somebody. They'll have to get rid of Jared Bayless to make it work, but they have a first-round pick they can make that work with. But yeah, I mean, LeBron to the Sixers, I think there's some steam there in terms of him at least taking a meeting in Philadelphia. Yeah,
and I think, going back to the Sam article, that was something that was kind of an oversight from many people was some of the things he did was not just to be bad to get draft choices, but it was also to clear out money so that they could be a player for players of this magnitude. And I think a lot of people, you hear this group of people who say they don't even want LeBron because they deem that we could do this ourselves. We don't need a player like that. That's not what really Sam viewed. Sam viewed it as, I have multiple angles to get the best players, whether it be the draft, a trade, or free agency.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of the opposite of the perception that you said. It's, he did this because the only way you can get a star and have a roster around them that is capable of winning a title is by getting them through the draft and having them on rookie contracts. Signing guys to like T.J. McConnell and Robert Covington and hoping one of them turns into a good player. And that's how you develop the core around what, in the future, you have a star or two, and then you can sign a guy like LeBron James to where you don't have to dump salary. Houston, for example, they're a team that's mentioned a lot for LeBron. In order to make that work, they're going to have to clear out most of their roster, and they're not really going to have much around. I mean, LeBron, Chris Paul, and James Harden, you can't really go wrong with a trio like that, but they're going to have to get rid of all their role players, whereas the Sixers wouldn't really have to get rid of anything outside of Jared Bayless.
Tomorrow night, Sixers and and Bulls right here on 97.3 ESPN. Zack Rosenblatt covers the Sixers for NJ.com. Follow him at Zack Blatt, and you can check out some video of Markelle Fultz. I know a lot of people like to entertain themselves with that in waiting for Sixers games, but that might be all we see of Markelle this season. Zack, always a pleasure, pal. Take care.
Thanks for having me, man.